Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 41 of the regular season for the San Jose Sharks. They took on the Tampa Bay Lightning and won by a score of 2-1. So the Sharks are at the halfway mark of the regular season now, and they will be heading into the second half on a surprising high note as they pick up the victory here tonight, breaking out of their 8-game losing streak against a team that just a few weeks ago, back in Tampa Bay, crushed the Sharks by a score of 8-1, and they had done so without their star player Nikita Kucherov. He was back in the lineup here tonight for Tampa, and yet the Sharks play a very good game and managed to pick up this win. Now, was this a picture-perfect, pristine style of game? Definitely not. Their offense still remains a bit of a struggle, with both Eklund and particularly Jake Wallman still out of the lineup. The amount of high-danger chances that the Sharks are actually generating in these games is rather low. The two goals that they do put up on the board are ones that beat Vasilevsky quite cleanly, so it is impressive for Toffoli and Ferraro to have been able to do so, but is it the most replicable type of situation? Not exactly. So the offense does remain a work in progress, but what really was a major difference maker here tonight was actually the Sharks' defense, and it is an extremely rare scenario this season in which we have been able to actually make that statement. Through many of the Sharks, if not most of their losses this season, the defense has been at the forefront of reasons to blame, and even in some of the Sharks' wins, the defense has not looked very good, and yet coming into tonight against the highest scoring team in the NHL in terms of goals per game, which the Tampa Bay Lightning are, the Sharks limiting that to just one goal is extremely impressive. And it's not just, the goaltending was great here tonight. We'll get to that a little bit later, but the defense doesn't really give Tampa a lot to work with. And so the actual will and the want to win this game for San Jose was absolutely there, especially in comparison to just a couple of days ago against the Philadelphia Flyers, where the Sharks put up one of their more lifeless performances of the season. So a great response game from that. In the first period here tonight, it was kind of back and forth, I would say. The Lightning generated the better of the chances, primarily because they managed to actually get some rush opportunities here in this first period. A breakaway, a couple 2-on-1s, 3-on-2 types of situations. It wasn't the same exact scenario where, like the other night against the Philadelphia Flyers, where the Flyers were stretching out the neutral zone. This time it was just the Sharks' defense getting a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too antsy there in the neutral zone, which allowed these openings for Tampa. But Sharks goaltender Askarov there to bail them out, as is has been the case thus far this season for Askarov. And so it was the Sharks with the only goal of the first 20 minutes coming from Tyler Toffoli, a really nice one at that, pulls off the toe drag move and beats Vasilevsky quite cleanly. So it is 1-0 San Jose after the first period. In the second, as per usual, this was the best period of the game for the San Jose Sharks. They managed to pick up a goal that extends their lead to 2 goals, something that we have not really managed to say a lot over this 8-game losing streak, and that was coming from Mario Ferraro, and it looked like they'd managed to close out this second period with that 2-goal lead, which would be a nice little cushion heading into the final 20 minutes. But as per usual, a momentum shifting moment does occur. It is yet again not a Lightning goal or anything, but it is a Sharks power play. The power play tonight remains completely lifeless. This power play that shifts the momentum, it's one thing if you're not coming out on the ice and scoring goals or getting great chances, but it is an entirely different thing when the team that is shorthanded is getting not only more offensive zone time but more great chances on net than the team that has all 5 players on the ice. It was just not a good look, and it woke the Lightning up a little bit in the end of that second period, and they would get a goal from Anthony Cirelli to bring this one to within 1, which put the Sharks in a very familiar position heading into the third period. We have seen many times over this 8-game losing streak the Sharks have a 1-goal lead at some point or heading into the third period, and every single one of those times the Sharks would throw it away. Here tonight, though, definitely a different result. They play pretty good defensive hockey. Obviously, there was some turtling involved here. They weren't pushing the pace all that much. Some score effects do come into play, which allow the Lightning to get some good looks on net, including that Nick Paul oh-so-close opportunity that Askarov came up with a huge save on. But besides that, I thought the Sharks actually did a pretty good job And especially once it got down to the 6-on-5 situation, we saw San Jose really sacrificing to be able to get these pucks out of the zone. They were winning races, they were winning battles, and the Lightning could barely get anything established over these last couple of minutes. Obviously, you do say, well, there was no Victor Hedman, because he does actually leave this game with just a few minutes left in the third period when he takes a puck to the side of the head. So that does aid the Sharks, but there are still some big name players on the ice for Tampa Bay, and the Sharks, they didn't allow them to generate anything, and they closed this one out 2-1. We moving on to the players to talk about now. We have the Sharks top line. It is Granlund and Kostin being joined this time by Fabian Zetterlund. So no more Cunnin on this top line. And we shall start off with Mikael Granlund, who I am very excited that he managed to pick up this assist on the Mario Ferraro goal, manages to get his name on the board, because this was a pretty good game for Mikael Granlund. Offensively, he was holding on to pucks. He was actually managing to make some plays, playing with a lot more finesse than we have usually seen from him. So hopefully that can kind of bode well moving forward. But what I really appreciated from Granlund here tonight was actually his defensive play. We saw this especially in the 6-on-5 situation, multiple moments high up in the Sharks defensive zone where he's able to make the key play out and into the neutral zone to prevent Tampa from really getting anything established there. And this is exactly why he, even through his struggles as of late, even through the last 10 to 15 games where he hasn't really been all that effective offensively, why he still continues to get massive minutes for the Sharks, easily up at 20 plus minutes in many of the games that he has played thus far this season. He is still a huge portion of this team, and I thought this was a good bounce back game for Granlund. When it comes to his two line mates, Klim Kostin, I was not particularly impressed with in the previous game against the Philadelphia Flyers. I also thought he bounced back rather well. We didn't really get to see much of Kostin in the third period, which is not that much of a surprise. He himself is not great defensively, so I'm not, it doesn't come out of left field that Warsofsky would kind of not prioritize him as much to get him on the ice. But through the first couple of periods when he was getting more consistent shifts, it wasn't great play, but it was an improvement. It was pretty good, and so I would say it was an alright outing for Kostin. And then on the other side, we do have Fabian Zetterlund. So in a way, you could say he gets promoted, but it's also sort of demoted as he leaves Smith and Celebrini's side. Maybe not as much offense going to be occurring on the ice for him. Here tonight, I didn't think exactly Zetterlund was great. I thought he played an alright game. Nothing amazing or major, but it was decent enough as an outing. Then we get to the Sharks' second line, where we have Smith and Celebrini kept together as a duo, and they are joined surprisingly by Colin Graf. One of the reasons back in the early parts of this season where we didn't really see much of Celebrini and Smith, the logic, or we didn't see them much together. The logic was that playing two of these young guys, inexperienced players in the NHL together, it's not something coaches usually do because defensively it's a bit of a suspect area. But because Celebrini has done enough thus far this season to prove himself as a responsible defensive player, and the fact that Colin Graf has done exactly that with the San Jose Barracuda, which is reflected by the fact that he was getting some shifts on the Sharks' penalty kill here tonight against an extremely dangerous Tampa Bay Lightning power play, Warsofsky did feel comfortable enough having these three players on the ice rather consistently tonight. Having said that, did it really work out? Not exactly, I would say. Colin Graf coming into this one, it kind of put him in a bit of a tough spot because both Celebrini and Smith play a very high skill style of game. They're going for these crazy stretch passes. They're going for these moves that you're not really going to be 100% ready for if you're not kind of on the same page as those two players, and I don't think Graf really was. And so from an offensive perspective, Graf really didn't get to do much of anything here tonight, but he played a solid enough game that I don't think as though he were immediately saying, okay, he needs to get out of the lineup. But I do wonder if perhaps there might be a better slot for him. Maybe Warsofsky will be willing to have Graf continue to play with these two players and hope that some chemistry will spark and develop. But maybe it would be best to have even Zetterlund still back in this situation, or try Kovalenko or something like that, and then have Graf play with maybe a slightly slower line. For instance, if you play him with a Wenberg and Toffoli, that could be a bit of a better trio. When it comes to Will Smith, because of Graf being here, previously with Fabian Zetterlund did give more of a shooting option on this line. Graf not so much, and so Smith was kind of like the resident shooter on this trio of players, and we saw that a ton. He had multiple shot attempts, but interestingly enough, he didn't actually end up with any shots on goal here tonight. And why is that? Well, it goes back to something that I had mentioned back in my rookie update just about a week ago, which was that Smith seems to lack a little little bit of strength into his shot. It feels as though he is flubbing these pucks more often than most players. We saw 3 times in the first period here where he had himself in a great shooting position and he would just fan on it completely. A couple of other times as he settled in a little bit more, he would end up just shooting the puck wide, which I guess is an improvement somewhat, but you want to see him be able to get a little stronger on his stick, a criticism I have given to Will Smith before, because with all of the actual chances that he is getting, if he's able to get the puck towards the net, he's going to be picking up more of these goals. So when it comes to Smith, I liked that he was able to do exactly that. Again, however, here tonight, we did see this sort of give and take with Will Smith. For instance, there was a pass that he tried that he pulled off just the other night against the Philadelphia Flyers, pack up to Macklin Celebrini, a 100-foot pass across the ice up in the neutral zone to find Celebrini streaking with speed. He tried the same move here tonight. This time it was actually picked off by Braden Point. We also saw him late in the third period try again an aggressive pass across the offensive zone blue line. That also ended up getting picked off. So it's the give and take in Will Smith's game. It is the type of situation where you do not want to discourage this type of play all the time, because then you don't end up with those great passes like we did see against the Philadelphia Flyers. But at the same time, you do have to drill in a little bit the time and place type of situation. When your team is holding a 1-goal lead with 6 or 7 minutes left in the third period, are you really going for a low percentage pass across your offensive zone blue line? Probably not. And so Smith, I think he got maybe one more shift after that, so I don't think he was fully benched for that, but it was definitely a mistake that did stand out. All in all, though, I wasn't all that upset with how Smith played here tonight. Though I will mention one last thing, he did drop the coverage on that Nick Paul third period great chance, the one amazing opportunity that Askarov had to come up with a huge save on. Will Smith not keeping his head on a swivel, not realizing Nick Paul was behind him, who was the guy he needed to be covering. Should the defense have maybe done a slightly better job? Perhaps, but that's his man and he beat him to the net. And then finally, we do have Macklin Celebrini, who he did have some nice moves here. We saw him manage to deke out a couple of players in the neutral zone, which is always going to happen with Celebrini. He did also take a penalty, which I thought was kind of not the best call. I would not have necessarily made that call, but I'm not an NHL official. Otherwise, though, Celebrini didn't get to do a ton here tonight. His performance on the power play I actually thought was weaker than usual. Usually he's like the one shining light on the Sharks power play. Here tonight, not even the case there. I thought he struggled in that particular area. And then at even strength, he had some good connections with Will Smith, so it certainly wasn't a terrible game for Celebrini, but we have seen him play better than this. And then when it comes to the Sharks' third line, we have Wenberg, Toffoli, and Kovalenko. We'll start off with Kovalenko, who was very quiet, not making much of an impact, not only just in the previous game against the Flyers, but as of late, including, obviously he had that game as a healthy scratch because of this very exact reason. Here tonight, I thought it was definitely a slight improvement over the usual. Kovalenko did find himself in some scoring positions, especially in the earlier parts of this game. He was being aggressive. A lot of the times he was managing to get onto players in the offensive zone and provide decent forechecking pressure. So I'm definitely not upset with the way Kovalenko played here tonight, but again, it is about raising that level. It is about kind of really bringing it up a little bit to be a consistent offensive threat on the ice and not just be a bottom six grinder, because we saw when he first arrived here in San Jose that he has the skill and he has the capability to be a strong middle six player, and he has just sort of gotten away from that over the last couple of weeks. When it comes on the other side, we do have Tyler Toffoli. I mentioned already that incredible goal that he scored, his 15th of the year, and since we are at the halfway mark, it is very easy to project over a full season. 15 on the year gives him a pace of 30 goals, which would be quite nice to see, and definitely worth the $6 million that the Sharks are paying him thus far this year and for the next 3 seasons after that. It's been a bit of an up and down season generally for Toffoli. There were definitely times, especially at the beginning of the year, in which I wasn't extremely impressed with what he has done, but he's been a lot better, I would say, in this second quarter thus far. I think Toffoli here tonight in particular looked rather good. He scores this goal. It wasn't consistently amazing, but he was all right. This third line in general wasn't extremely impressive, but they managed to play mostly in the offensive zone. So from a defensive standpoint, I think they did some pretty good things. And then when it comes to Alex Wenberg, I was really unimpressed with him in the previous one against the Philadelphia Flyers. He made basically zero impact on the game. Here tonight, the offense is still something that you're going to be wanting to see a little bit more from, especially, this is a line that features Toffoli, who should be like a second line player. Wenberg is a really solid third line center, and Kovalenko has some offensive talent. I feel as though once this line generates some chemistry, if kept together, they should be a decent scoring threat on the ice. Wenberg is and should be a part of that, but even if there wasn't much offense this game from him, defensively I thought he did some good things, so I can't be too upset. When it comes to the Sharks' fourth line, we have Goodrow with Sturm and Cunnin. In this fourth line, you gotta appreciate and you gotta give them credit the effort that we saw. It kind of reminded me of the game a few nights ago against the Vegas Golden Knights, the type of game where you just like the energy that these fourth liners do bring to the game, and especially in the third period, some of those shifts from even Barclay Goodrow, who I'm usually very hard on, were actually quite good. Luke Cunnin, I thought, also got very much involved here tonight. There was a shift right near the end of the third period, actually, with about 3 or so minutes to go. It was Goodrow and Cunnin who found themselves on the ice with Celebrini, perhaps Warsofsky not wanting to play Smith and Graf in this late situation, but Celebrini being more defensively responsible does get that opportunity. And we saw Goodrow and Cunnin just lock it down in the corner for a good 30 to 45 seconds in the offensive zone. They weren't generating any chances on net, but with 3 minutes to go, with the Sharks holding a 1-goal lead, that's exactly what you want to see. So impressive, the type of effort that they were able to put up. Definitely can't say too much bad things about this Sharks fourth line. Sturm as well, I should also mention, involved here tonight, getting some good block shots. We saw him have to actually head to the bench for a while after blocking a tough one, but that's just the type of effort you're going to get from Nico Sturm. And then we get to the Sharks defensemen, and as I mentioned, it was a great game for most of these, if not all of these players, honestly. We'll start off with the Sharks top pairing of Thrun and Ceci. I will say, in particular for Thrun, he struggled at the beginning of this game. I thought the first 10 to 15 minutes of this first period was not very good, but he brought it up as it went on. The last few minutes of the first, he was quite good. The second period, I thought he was maybe the Sharks' best defenseman. The third period, I also thought he did some really good things, and so it was nice to see Henry Thrun have a good performance there. And when it comes to his defensive partner Cody Ceci, a lot of the same things can be said. We actually saw Ceci do some really great things against some extremely good players on the Lightning side. Kucherov and Point, he was winning battles in front, which had been a bit of an issue for him these last couple of weeks. He was jumping up aggressively to poke pucks out of the zone and get up involved in the rush. So I really liked Ceci's performance here tonight on top of that. When it comes to the Sharks' second defensive pairing, which has been a major issue and problem point recently, Liljegren had a nice bounce back game. I thought he was really strong throughout. The third period, there were a couple of shakier moments, but through most of this game, I liked what Liljegren did. The same would go for Mario Ferraro. Ferraro was kind of a bit of a hit or miss, I would say, because when he actually found himself on the ice with his usual defensive partner, Liljegren, I actually thought Ferraro was mostly quite good, but we did see him get many double shifts here tonight with Jan Ruda for a reason I will get to a little bit later. And when it was the classic Ferraro-Ruda pairing, that's where there were a little bit more struggles. So it wasn't a great, fantastic game for Mario Ferraro, but still quite solid and much better than we usually see from him, and he did get a goal, so you gotta give him some credit there. And then on the third defensive pairing, we have Ruda paired with Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who makes his debut this season in his 19th year in the NHL. We have not seen Vlasic at all thus far this year due to an injury at the beginning of the season. We were completely left in the dark about what this injury actually was or what was keeping him out so long. It was about a month ago when the Sharks were beginning that 6-game road trip where it was said like, oh yeah, he might actually get in, and then never actually heard anything else about it. But finally now, at the halfway mark of the season, Vlasic jumps into the lineup, and he was very much eased into it by Warsofsky. There were many opportunities in which Ruda was on the ice. He was going to be coming out with his usual defensive partner, but then, as I mentioned, Ferraro ended up getting the double shift. For instance, in the first period, I noticed Ruda steps onto the ice. The Lightning send out their Kucherov point line, and so Warsofsky not feeling confident enough yet in Vlasic to have him play in that type of shift consistently, and so Ferraro stepped onto the ice. But in the minutes that Vlasic did get, around 12 or so, I actually thought he was remarkably solid. It wasn't anything extremely impressive, though that primary assist on the Toffoli goal was quite nice, but it was honestly like a kind of classic Mark-Edouard Vlasic game, reminiscent of many of the days of old in which Vlasic was just a strong, reliable, shutdown defenseman. Not to say that he's going to be able to find that game again here. It is likely just a matter of time before Vlasic kind of reverts back to the Vlasic we are used to from the past 5 to 6 seasons, but it was still a nice blast from the past to see it anyway. Now, what is very interesting about Vlasic's inclusion in the lineup here tonight is that it does end up drawing Mukhamadullin out of it, and he had been up and down a little bit, but mostly rather solid for the Sharks over these last couple of weeks. And we also have to remember that Jake Wallman still remains on the sidelines, and once Wallman is healthy to return, that begs the question of who steps out then. Would it be Vlasic or would it be someone like Henry Thrun? We do not really know. And it feels as though if the Sharks end up with a defensive unit of Wallman, Ceci, Ferraro, Liljegren, Vlasic, Ruda, it will be kind of a missed opportunity to have Thrun and Mukhamadullin and even Jack Thompson to go to someone who's still in the Barracuda, all sitting out and not playing NHL games. So it will be very interesting to see what Warsofsky decides to do with his defensive pairings moving forward once Wallman is healthy again. And then finally, we have the Sharks goaltender Yaroslav Askarov. I talked about him a lot in just the previous game against the Philadelphia Flyers, where I mentioned where if the Sharks actually want to give themselves the best chance to win a game, they need to be playing Askarov over Georgiev, and I thought that he should have gotten the start the other night against Philadelphia, because that was an easier matchup than any of the 3 games that the Sharks had coming up. But I should never doubt Askarov here. He puts up a stellar performance here tonight. As I said, his defense did do some really good things in front of him, and so he didn't have to stand on his head completely like he did the other night against the Edmonton Oilers, but still, there were some huge saves. I mentioned the rush chances that the Lightning were getting near the beginning of the game. I mentioned the Nick Paul opportunity late or in the middle part of that third period, and so Askarov was remarkably solid. He didn't have to be completely amazing, but he was really good. Picks up this victory, breaks out of the losing streak for the Sharks, and it will, like I said with Vlasic, be very interesting to see what the Sharks decide to do from a goaltending perspective. We don't know exactly how long Vanacek will remain on the sidelines. I believe the word was that he is week to week, so whether or not it is a couple of weeks or maybe even we'll have to wait until after the Four Nations face-off, which occurs in the middle of February, for him to return. But it does seem as though we will get a decent amount of time with Askarov and Georgiev as the Sharks' 2 main goaltenders, and we shall see if Warsofsky decides to lean more so onto Askarov. If he takes that basic approach of, I want to play both goalies enough, well, we're probably going to be dealing with a lot more losses because Georgiev is going to let in 4 goals. But if the Sharks are going to lean on Askarov some more, we have seen the type of efforts he is able to pull off, and maybe the Sharks' more wins are in their future. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday, an afternoon game where they'll be taking on the New Jersey Devils. The Devils have been one of the best teams in the NHL this season. They are on their current California road trip, and they've lost both of the previous games against the Anaheim Ducks and the Los Angeles Kings, and so they will definitely be looking for some revenge, especially since, as well, the previous matchup between these two teams, the Sharks beat them 1-0. Likely a performance in which the Devils felt as though they deserved a better result. So the Sharks will have to be at their best if they want to try and start a little bit of a winning streak here by putting up 2 in a row. Class dismissed.